Hey guys, what's happening? So, I want to talk about Deadpool Assassin for a little bit. Because I know a lot of you guys have been either leaving comments on my other Deadpool videos or my other videos on Marvel Legacy saying, oh man, Deadpool's a villain again. And from reading the series thus far, that's not really so much what I've taken from it. But instead, much like the Immortal Hulk, it really feels like Deadpool is walking a lot closer on that gray line, that gray area like right in between. So I kind of figured for today's video, I'd talk about this one very much like we did the Immortal Hulk, and point out some of the new things about Deadpool in Marvel Legacy, then after that, come to the conclusion if he's leaning more towards the hero or the villain side. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you can catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so as far as Deadpool, and not really diving into a super deep history, but just a general run through. Because from the beginning, like day one, when we first seen Deadpool in New Mutants issue number 98, Fabian Nicieza and Rob Liefeld designed his character and introduced his character as a mercenary. And he was hired by a guy named Mr. Tolliver to find and kill Cable, but even back then, he would still crack jokes. And over the years with different writers, of course that would be amped up, and eventually we would get our fourth wall breaking Deadpool. But contrary to what a lot of people have been saying, at least to me, or at least I've been getting this a lot, because I hear a lot of people saying that Deadpool, he's serious again with Marvel Legacy and Deadpool Assassin, really just saying that they're taking Deadpool back to the way that he used to be. And I couldn't disagree more, because initially with Deadpool, okay, for one, he's always cracked the jokes. But I think one of the biggest differences, if anything's really changed with Deadpool, and I mean as a character, like aside from the fourth wall breaking, and the jokes that have really always been there, but they've been amped up and going over the top for quite a while, which I don't mind because he'll say things that your average character really wouldn't. But if anything's changed with Deadpool over the years, and more specifically in Marvel Legacy, it would be more so his moral compass. And that's something that's been alluded to for over a decade now. We've seen it happen in a number of different ways, whether it was as simple as him making internal decisions or fighting an imposter posing as himself and him being like, dang, am I really that bad? And I really wouldn't even say so much an imposter, because evil Deadpool actually was Deadpool, and not even from a different universe or anything like that, but he was actually the leftover limbs from Deadpool sewn together, and dude had like two right arms, which may sound and look ridiculous, but there was a couple times it really came in handy. No pun intended, like for real. But that was one of the things I liked a lot about Evil Deadpool, because it wasn't only just the creation of a new cool character, but it also gave us a glimpse of Wade Wilson dealing with the man in the mirror. And for me, that really does well with a character who mainly jokes a lot, because it shows you eventually somehow or some way this guy, he draws a line at a certain point. And that's really one of the biggest things that we see Wade deal with within the new Deadpool Assassin series. And once again, this isn't so much something new, and we've seen his character relatively deal with something like this before, but this time around it feels a bit newer. One, because the way that Colin Bunn does this, it's not like the main overpressing issue of the story arc, but rather it's something you see him dealing with as the narrative progresses. And I'll admit, this Deadpool is a bit closer to your early day assassin type Deadpool as far as his execution. And we'll talk about more on that in a little bit in his relation to Weasel, who really pretty much finds the jobs for him and makes sure he gets paid, so on and so forth. But to better express how I believe this Deadpool Assassin is a mixture of the new and the old, we gotta go back to the Cable files, man. Like when Cable, shortly after Deadpool's first appearance, where Cable did an assessment of who this new guy was, what are his motivations, what is he capable of. And this was about like 3 issues after Deadpool's first appearance, like the very beginning of X-Force. And Cable came to the conclusion that he's a very capable opponent, you know, his words exactly, and also he's very proficient in weapons use. But early on it was established that Deadpool at this time, when he first came out, that he was only after the money. Like he didn't care who he had to kill, good or bad, as long as that money came through. That was all that mattered, and that was all that he cared about. And Colin Bunn had also played with this idea with the more humorous approach when Deadpool started Heroes for Hire, which he had to change the name because Luke Cage was pretty much shutting that down. And I want to say he was about to like press charges or something like that. But either way, Deadpool then changed the name to Mercs for Money, because regardless, if you're good at something, you don't do it for free. But even then, the targets that he would take, they were all still villains. and they would tie into some type of rescue mission. Because at this point in time, still being a mercenary and the content having more of a slapstick kind of delivery, Deadpool still leaned more into your hero role, mainly because of the jobs he would take. And at the time, if anything was criminal about his character, it was more so the concept of him not paying the other members of the team. And when he did, it took forever to do so Domino pretty much took the team onto her own, and pretty much that was that. But in Deadpool Assassin, with Deadpool working with Weasel, aka Jack Hammer, who previously was just Deadpool's weapons dealer, and now he plays more heavily into the guy who finds the jobs for him. And from there, Wade will decide whether he'll take the job or not, with the only exception being whoever the hit is on, they gotta be somebody who is exceptionally bad, or in his words, somebody who deserves it. And between Wade and Jack, there's an understanding to a certain level of Jack knows what Wade is looking for. So when Jack brings Wade the option between taking down Shuten Doju and a bunch of different mercenaries who also have a hit on them, Wade, who is still about that money, that's never changed. He's just like, okay, I'll do both, because he figures, okay, if I just travel with these guys who are going at the same target, I'll just take them out before we hit the drop zone, and then when we arrive, I'll take out the target myself, getting a free ride and 2 paychecks. And with all things considered, like, had he really thought it through, he probably should have waited until after they took out the target and then took care of the other mercenaries. And I mean, I'm no hitman consultant, but I think that way around would have worked a little bit better into his favor. But still, you and I both know that making dumb decisions, even when Wade has good intentions, that combination in itself makes for great Deadpool writing. Because it's decisions like that that put him in a one-man fight against like 100 ninjas, some of which who are like immortal Iron Fist imposters. And Deadpool's not easily tricked with that, because he knows real fisting when he sees it. Because he's had his fair share of team-ups with Danny Rand, and I'm sure him and Blind Al watch Iron Fist on Netflix all the time, and he tells her how great of a fighter that Danny Rand is, and in many ways how the show is so accurate to his character. But if we didn't get this type of decision making, aside from his motives, through and through we would not get like these crazy kill shots, taking out Shuten by using one of the hands of his henchmen that tried to kill Wade earlier. And that's really the tone of this series, because even when it gets ridiculous to that extent, and this is really just a taste of the killing spree that he's on within this series, but even with that, it's not reaching too far to capture something spectacular or get too campy with the jokes. But instead, every payoff we get in the moments that may seem to go over the top, Bunn has either planted something earlier foreshadowing it, or it ties back into the history of connected characters. But it really takes a turn when Weasel gives Wade, or he lands a huge contract for protecting a guy named Charles Helder. And the price that Wade is being paid to protect this guy is substantially more than what he gets paid to take out a target. And by trusting Weasel's judgment, because he knows that they have an understanding of what type of jobs he takes and what kinds he doesn't. But when he takes this job to protect Charles Helder, he runs into all sorts of members of the Assassin's Guild, like Knock, who I'm pretty sure Domino killed, and Deadpool pretty much killed again. Then you got Harvester, who's a speedster who can pretty much tear down Deadpool quicker than he can regenerate. And even Razor Fist showed up, which let Wade know that people were paying top dollar to have this dude dead. And at one point, Wade was like, dude, like, what did you do? And with Helder feeling a certain level of comfort with Deadpool, seeing him take out all these people, he told him, you know, the same way that you take out certain bad guys time to time, you know, sometimes a kid's gotta die. And Deadpool's like, oh, okay. And after successfully keeping this dude alive, he calls Weasel up and he's like, oh yeah, that guy, he couldn't make it. Sorry. And Wade just takes him out himself. Because once again, even though this Wade Wilson is given that original grounded tone and really more of that balance of more grit and humor from his earlier days, now with him making the choice to only take out people who are doing evil, when Weasel tries to slip this one under his nose, Wade takes it as a form of betrayal. And he lets Weasel know, like, dude, don't play, you can get it too. But the interesting thing with Weasel, there's a lot more than meets the eye with this guy. And a lot of it I don't think Deadpool is fully aware of. Because for one thing, of course for the longest time he was Deadpool's weapons dealer and handled his gadgets and stuff like that. And a lot of that we saw in the Cable issues around like in the early 90s. But around the time that Weasel and Wade weren't on the best of terms, Weasel was killed by another mercenary named Macho Gomez. And before Weasel returned from the dead as Patient Zero, he had made a deal with Mephisto that he would bring back Peter Parker's soul. And eventually Deadpool did find out who he was at a time when he crossed over into the afterlife. But since Weasel has died again and returned back, Weasel has kind of just went into this normal looking life, like he's married, and unbeknownst to his wife, he handles these deals with Deadpool on the side, landing all these different contracts for him. And Deadpool's even figured out that Weasel's married, even though Weasel didn't just come out right and tell him. And in Deadpool Assassin, these are just like a couple of things that kind of led Wade to like not really trust him more recently in Marvel Legacy, not even considering their history in the past. But also what this does is it brings up an interesting question, or kind of a throwback to the last time we saw Weasel before he mysteriously came back, and that's a callback to like your Deadpool Spider-Man team up, where in one of Weasel's last conversations with Mephisto, Mephisto told Weasel that he wanted Deadpool's soul instead, which could be the underlying reason why they're working together again, just that Wade Wilson hasn't caught on to it yet. But I would love to see that he really has, and for Weasel to think that he's playing smarter than he really is. But on top of that, with Deadpool killing members of the Assassin's Guild, he also has them to deal with, or actually what's left of them. But that's some of the conflict that I like with this new Deadpool Assassin, because with him killing Shu Ten, who was a former member of the Hand, and the Hand being one of the biggest clients of the Assassin's Guild, and then after that taking out members of the Assassin's Guild by protecting then killing their mark, it just leads into the anticipation of more serious consequences for his actions. And hopefully the appearance of the Thieves Guild, which is like your rivalry to the Assassin's Guild, and that's all kind of like a callback to your older issues of Gambit and his solo series back in the early 90s as well, because all these organizations tie together and bring in the possibility of seeing these other characters come in later on in the series. But either way, that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Let me know what is your take on Deadpool Assassin. Do you feel like he's leaning more towards the hero side, the villain? Because he's always been a bit of both. Like, I don't think that'll ever change with Deadpool. But which one do you think he's leaning more towards, I should ask? But let me know in the comments, and I'll probably put a poll up to see which one wins, or which way the scale tips. But I'll do it for this one, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Alright, later.